guys doing? This is a topic that is personal for myself and anyone who has taken time to enjoy a sport, or if you've played a sport, um, if you ever taken off the jersey for the last time, walked off the field for the last time. We're going to talk about how this transition can be extremely very. It can be a blessing, or it can be extremely brutal. I'm going to talk about three athletes who have lived and gone through it, and give you three physical activities that I believe that can carry any former athlete or anybody going through some sort of transition on the other side and protect their mental health and their mental well-being as they make their way through this transition. I'm Coach E. Allen. This is the Game Ready podcast here on the Sideline Sports Network. And let's go. Let's get into it. I want you to take a moment and imagine yourself spending your entire life preparing for one specific task, one specific role. And mine was being an athlete. And like most people, being an athlete becomes a part of who you are. Every morning has a purpose. Every day has structure. You have a team, you have a family, you have relationships, you have the locker room. I miss the locker room every day almost. I didn't always like it, but I miss the camaraderie, the relationships that I built, the coaches, and being united under one goal, trying to reach a win, a championship, a division title, whatever. And then you end up being celebrated for who you are and what you can do. But one day it has to come to an end. The cheering stops. Your structured schedule disappears. Your team, which you considered your family, scatters to the wind. And the next morning, when you wake up, for the first time in your life, over like maybe possibly 2 decades, you don't know what to do, and pretty much sometimes you don't know who you are. And it's one of the hardest and one of the most least talked about experiences in the world of sports. It's the transition out of the game that you love to play. It doesn't just happen to professional athletes. It happens to people on all levels. It happens to athletes of all skill levels, college seniors, high school seniors, people who will never play another down or another play on an organized sports team again. And study after study shows that walking away from a sport can be one of the most dangerous moments in someone's mental health, and it can lead to a tragic end if you don't prepare. You don't have a plan going into that transition. We're going to look at what actually happens to when a person ends the game, and it doesn't happen it is just not one loss. You just don't lose your experiences playing the game. It actually goes into 5 losses. And all these losses happen at the same time. And when you understand those 5 losses, you understand why it hits some people so hard, and it gives people a reason to try to play beyond where they're supposed to play. And some people don't know when to stop, and you play longer than what you should. One of the first things people lose is their identity. When you lose your identity, and for most athletes, and I can speak for myself, speak for myself. One of the things that you lose is your ability to know who you are. You've been preparing for this. As an athlete, you've attached your identity to this sport, which has actually made it hard for you to actually see yourself as anything other than a football player, a basketball player, baseball player, whatever, because you're good at it, and you've been doing this since childhood. And when the thing ends, when the sport ends and the last play is played, there's a hole where your entire sense of self-worth is wrapped up in this sport. When it all ends, that's when things start to cascade, and things go can go into a negative direction. And the longer you play, some psychologists consider that that makes the connection even more intense. So if you play high school, the connection will be intense, but it gets even more intense when you go to college. And then if you play beyond college, that connection and that tie to your self worth becomes pretty much who you are. And it's harder to fall. It's harder to actually transition because you you don't have that sport anymore. The second thing that you lose is the structure of the sport that you participate in. Um, I know for myself as an athlete, one of the things that what I really missed was the structure. Everything was structured down to the last minute. Training, meals, film study, travel, even recovery and treatment. All this structure, it sets the tone for your daily life. And when that when that's taken away, you feel empty, and that's when anxiety sets in, and those empty days can turn into some really really lonely days, and that's where the mind gets in trouble. The third thing is one thing that you probably wouldn't even consider. It changed your brain chemistry. Has actually you lose control of your brain chemistry in some kind of way, um, which, which probably was one of the most intense part of this transition. As an athlete's brain adapts, especially as they grow, and you've been playing since you were 10, 12 years old, through those formidable years, you're that intense physical activity through training, through practice, through competition, that during that maturate that while you're maturing, that exercise floods the brain with dopamine, which is one of the most effective antidepressants as we know of. And a lot of athletes, if you hear their stories, they have attached athletics to a way to vent, a way to release, a way to give them a reason to actually continue to to go to school, and so in some cases to even exist. And I can attest to that myself. If it wasn't for football, I probably it would have been hard for me to even consider going to college. So it gave me a way to have a release, and I was good at it. So I attached my identity to it myself. So I can speak from firsthand knowledge that it is a hard transition to go from playing a sport to not playing a sport. When a lifelong athlete stops physical activity at that high volume, the body goes through a chemical withdrawal almost similar to like what a drug addict would experience. You experience mood swings, you have physical issues. Uh, it's pretty much all psychological, and but it takes a real heavy toll on you. The fourth thing that you lose is community, which is connected to your emotional health and your mental health. You lose the team, you lose the locker room, you lose the people who stood by you, and really you consider these people your family. And some people, you hear football players, basketball players, um, they call themselves brothers and sisters of each other because you went through some tough times with someone, and that helps you actually get through the the monotonous, heavy, hard training that all athletes go through. That sense of belonging is one of the strongest mental protectors that there is. And in retirement, that all can be erased in a single day. The fifth thing is that you lose your purpose. You lose the main goal, which is set forth by the coaching staff or even by yourself, your individual goals. You miss, preparing for the next game, preparing for the next season, and you miss chasing a a purpose. Human beings need a something strong to move towards, and when you take away the field and the scoreboard, a lot of people simply don't know how to handle that, and they they lose themselves because they don't have that reason to get up in the morning. The identity, the structure, the brain chemistry, and the community and purpose, they are all gone at once. And it's not just a rough patch, it can be a living hell. And it's a perfect storm for anxiety, for depression. And it's exactly why some of the strongest people in the world have a hard time transitioning to a regular life after sports have ended. And that's even happened, you compare to other areas of professions, that transition, it can be heavy. We're going to talk about 3 athletes tonight. One of the athletes we're going to talk about is Serena Williams. Everybody knows who Serena Williams is. She is considered one of the top athletes of this century, not just in tennis. She was playing tennis ever since she was ever since she was 3 years old. She had a tennis racket in her hand. When she stepped away from the game in 2022, she refused to even call retirement. She called it her evolution. And she said that one thing that helped her was reframing it in that fashion. And she couldn't even talk about leaving the game. It made her extremely emotional, and all she could do was really kind of cry. And the only person she talked to was her therapist. She was smart enough to reach out and get some help to help her with that transition. And we're going to talk about that. And the athletes who are proactive, they have a easier transition. I can even talk on a personal level. My last year playing, I sought off therapy, and my therapy helped me immensely. It gave me a idea of why I played the sport. It gave me an understanding of why the sport was ending and how I was going to manage that. And it gave me some tools to help the transition, go a little bit smoother. It didn't go smooth as it was supposed to, but it did help. I was proactive, and we're going to talk about one of the athletes who was extremely helpful, and when he was proactive with his transition from being a professional athlete. With this transition and with her actually framing it in that way and her seeking out help, she poured everything into her family. She has 2 beautiful daughters. She actually has a resurgence in her career. She's built dozens of businesses that are extremely successful. She's invested in different sports leagues. But even for Serena Williams, this transition was not a victory lap. It was a genuine search for her new identity, which I think she found if you follow her on social media, if you just see any of her many commercials that she is as a spokesperson for. The second athlete we're going to talk about is Dwyane Wade. He is the king of Miami. He's a Miami Heat legend, a Hall of Famer, and one of the biggest names in basketball of the last 2 decades. And this is why Dwyane Wade's story is so important in the context that I'm talking about tonight. He was proactive in his search for help because he knew what was about to hit him. So he went and sought out therapy in 2019 before he even retired. And he admitted that he didn't think he needed therapy until he saw the end coming, and the end was near. He was in the right place, and it really helped him describe what he was going through when he actually went to therapy, and he did it in his own words when he talked to the therapist, which gave him some clarity and an understanding on how he was actually going to make this transition. And he explained it in a way in an interview where he said that he had been playing basketball since he was 5 years old, and it was not a job. It was something that he truly enjoyed, and it was like his release valve. It gave him a focus of a place to put all his energy, all of his aggression, and all his emotional issues that he's experienced coming from the household that he was a part of when he was younger. If you followed his story, if you know his story is pretty impressive. His mom was a minister. She was a single parent, and she raised him by herself. And he was raised in Chicago. I'm not sure what side of Chicago, but he had a pretty tough childhood. And basketball gave him that outlet. And what happened is he got an idea of where he needed to go. He found a new skill. He found a new outlet, and it was probably one of the smartest things he did was being proactive in his journey. He asked for help before the actual fall, and then he began a new life through his family and his businesses, and he's doing excellent. I've seen him on a couple of podcasts, and he looks extremely content and looks very, very happy. And the third athlete we're going to talk about is Michael Phelps. Everybody knows who Michael Phelps is. Michael Phelps is one of the most decorated Olympians in history of all sports. He has 28 gold medals, 28 medals, 23 gold medals, and he's probably considered one of the greatest swimmers to ever live. And by his account, when he retired in 2012 after the Olympic Games, he fell into a really deep depression to where he almost considered not living anymore. And can be surprising. It's not really surprising to one of the, coming from one of the most successful athletes on the planet at that time. But he said openly that after his first retirement, he saw himself only as a swimmer, a guy who in caps and goggles, who was just running through everybody. He was not the person who had feelings underneath all those medals. He didn't see himself beyond the medals until he actually sought out help. When the swimming stopped, there was nothing that he could stand on after his first retirement. And what saved him was reaching out during that time. And in therapy, he honestly rebuilt a better version of himself, and he understood how to exist outside of the pool. And today he's one of the most important voices in the world of athletes, in the focus of improving the mental health of athletes. And he plainly states that depression never just disappears. He said that he is just managing it for the rest of his life, and trying to seek a purpose in that pursuit. If you look at it, these are three of the most accomplished athletes that have ever lived. There are three different sports, three different eras, and each one of them told us the truth. When the game ended, they had to fight and find a way to transition, evolve, and they struggled. But in Serena's case, she reached out for a new identity. Dwayne prepared for the fall before before it could even happen, and Michael Phelps showed us that no matter how deep the hole can go, if you ask for help, you can help save yourself. So I'm going to give you some tools as a coach, and I have several members who use this setting as a mental health release setting. And I'm almost like a mental therapist in some ways. I'm not accredited in any kind of way. I just try to listen, and I try to make sure that I am in tune with my members while we're actually working out and we're actually training. So I'm going to give you three activities that I know would possibly help, and that's helped a number of athletes make that transition in a healthy and productive way. And some people ask, why would I say physical activity is included in this specifically? But because I think that they're all linked to those 5 losses that we mentioned earlier, which is loss of identity, loss of structure, loss of change of brain chemistry, loss of community, and loss of purpose. And the right programming, in my opinion, not just the programming, but the right sequence of programming can actually help resolve all those five at once if you're consistent. And to be clear, this is not a replacement for therapy or physical any kind of professional help. I'm not a psychologist. I just know what I've seen works, and I know what works for me. When you're in this setting, you kind of let loose, and it gives you a sense of purpose, if anything. And that's pretty much, that's like almost three. That's half the battle right there. Mental health is extremely important, and the only way that you can truly get the true benefit out of anything in this setting is to possibly seek some help from some sort of from some sort of therapist. Excuse me. Um, but exercise is uniquely powerful in this whole process. And this is what I think here are three things that I think everybody should build their physical plan, their plan to make their transition from, it can be sports, your career transition. These are going to be three things that you can do, you can incorporate on your own. One is strength training. And it's number one for a reason. I love to lift. I didn't intentionally make strength training the number one, but I know strength training can be an identity bridge. And as a former athlete, it helps you continue to train. It gives your body purpose. It gives you what that transition takes away. It gives you a measurable way to see progress physically, which is huge, which translates into you actually seeing that on the mental side also. On a simple platform, you can look at it like this. You add weight to a bar, and every week you add weight, and you're able to push that weight. You're able to increase your physical strength, and it almost becomes an intrinsic need to come in and test yourself. In life, somehow you have that structure again. You have a goal to reach, and that's lifting that weight and reaching those goals. That's like a win every week, and that can be a bridge to help you make it through that transition, in a really productive way. And it helps you focus your competitive drive, and it's pretty much. I think it's the healthiest way to go when you're trying to compete against one of the most one of the toughest opponents you ever will come up against, which is yourself. Because I believe when you do become physically active, you become a better version of yourself every time you actually work out. And when you see that accomplishment, when you have a sense of purpose and you have a sense of accomplishment, that feeling gets stronger and it becomes real, and you've earned it. And it's a key to protecting your mental well-being. The second tool I would say is aerobic exercise. Aerobic exercise like running, cycling, swimming, rowing, and a new, most fashionable form of exercise is rucking. These steady state forms of exercise are rhythmic. They get your heart rate up, and they can be very extremely low impactful on your movement. Running can be impactful, but rucking, rowing, swimming, and just even walking is like a bridge, a chemistry bridge, a chemical bridge to actually give you that dopamine hit I shouldn't say hit. It'll give you that dopamine rush that you got when you were playing sports. And it might be one of the most important of all three of these these remedies. Aerobic exercise is a proven method that is a mood regulator. It eases anxiety, and it helps improve your sleep, and it helps you manage your depression. And I know when I go walk, it helps me clear my head. When I'm doing anything physically active, especially walking so slow, steady state cardio, it helps me think a lot clearer. One of the most famous people, one of the most iconic people in the world, Steve Jobs, he would always hold his meetings in groups and he would take his staff for walks. And if you see the success of Apple over the last 40 years, that will tell you how important physical activity and how thought can actually give you a limitless imagination, and it'll allow you to open up areas of your mind that you never thought that you could actually access. Physical activity is like medicine, and I've always said this: movement is medicine, and you should try and get some every day. That may sound a little corny, but it works. The third activity is find a new sport or skill. This is number three. Um, it could be a sports-based skill. It could be, a dance class, but it's ideally one you can do with other people. Golf, jujitsu, tennis, and pickleball, rock climbing. I don't, I'm not a big fan. I'm not going to say rock climbing per se, but it's a challenging sport. Or joining a rec league. Um, this is why this third one matters. Because it kind of connects all five. It restores the two losses the gym can't really fully replace: community and novelty and connection. When you join a sports league, you join and you try to learn about a new sport. It forces you to become a beginner again, and you're a rookie, and that reignites your competitive drive, your curiosity. It gives you a new purpose and a reason to even get up in the morning. Um, it's something to chase again, and when you do it with other people, it kind of builds that locker room environment that gives you some belonging and gives you a set of new teammates, and that connection may protect your mind um, when most things probably can't, and it will give you an idea that you're not alone, and especially when you're around a bunch of like-minded people, it's invaluable. And if you've listened to my podcast over the last several weeks and looked at my content, I've talked a lot about golf. And this is why I think golf is such a powerful second act for so many former athletes and even athletes who are still playing the game. It's not just a game, it can give you an identity, it can give you community. It is a major challenge to get that ball inside the hole. Um, it gives you it gives you an idea of where you're at strength wise. It can actually you can apply golf to your physical activity and actually create a training program or a workout program that is based on the principles of improving you as a golfer. When you put all three of these things together, it's not just a workout plan. You have a plan to rebuild your self identity brick by brick when everything that you've been through in that transition has been torn down. It gives these three things actually will help you. And I'm a true believer that golf is a forever sport. So I would suggest, even if you go and play putt putt, go go to a pop stroke and pick up a club and try and learn a new sport. It'll give you a reason to actually go and test yourself mentally and physically. Why this matters? I want to be clear. Um, why would I put movement at the center of this athlete's transition? Because the alternative of what fills the void when nothing healthy does is not a good end. When we when the identity and the structure and the chemistry of we lose our community and we lose our purpose, when they all disappear at once, nothing can replace them. Pretty much your life becomes a vacuum. And too often that isolation, that gets filled with isolation, substance abuse, and despair, and it goes down a slippery slope where it doesn't end very well. We over the last several months, we've lost too many former athletes, and I'm not sure what their plan was in place or even if they had a plan. But I believe that if physical activity was a part of their plan, they probably would have had a fighting chance to figure things out, and it would have been a lot more smoother. And it's not about getting in shape. It's not about aesthetics in some sort of way. It's about giving a person a reason to actually get up out of the bed in the morning and chase a goal and reset their brain and give them a reason to really live. So to every athlete who has heard the final whistle and wonders what comes next, the game was never about just you. You were not the goal. You were not the game. It was the first place that you experienced, victory. It was the first place where you were accepted, but it's not who you are. It gave you discipline. It gave you drive. It gave you a place to go when you probably didn't have anywhere else to go. One thing that you have to do when you do retire, you do make a transition, you have to keep moving forward. You have to keep chasing something. And you got to remember, you're not the athlete or the stats that you accumulated as an athlete. You have to just keep showing up for the rest of your life. And as a final note, if you know somebody or love somebody, that you know somebody or have somebody that you love and is struggling with this transition, and please encourage them to reach out and talk to someone. In the U.S., you can text 988 to the suicide crisis line at any time, ask for help, and make the same move that some of these athletes that I mentioned tonight have made. It's not a weakness to reach out and get help. It's a strength. Until next Tuesday, I'm Coach E. Allen. This is the Game Ready Podcast. Get ready, stay ready, be ready, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Take care.